never knitting any knit gifts for anyone else ever again because... Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. Today, we are discussing some progress on my spring knitting plans, which are going, better than I maybe a little bit feared, much better than some of you certainly thought. Some of the comments on my last video, which we will get into. If I sound funky today, I am getting over a cold, and it chose today to sort of congregate at the very back of my throat, directly where it impacts what I sound like. So what a perfect day to be recording. Hello. As for my mug and tea of the day, I'm drinking out of my spring tulip mug, which I just brought out. It's one of the mugs that I bring out special for spring and like hide the rest of the year. I did reach a point where I had to start rotating my mug collection. We don't have to talk about it. Anyway, this is more a manifestation of the weather that I hope to have because it is currently snowing outside. So we are in the winter that won't end, but allegedly one day soon, summer will return to Narnia once again. So out of this, I'm drinking my usual favorite Sloan Classic Earl Grey, and also feeling the springy vibes, I'm wearing my Arden top by Kindred Red, which I knit last summer, and so far I have worn this 5 times, which feels decent considering I think I finished it toward the end of last summer, and it's just a particular top. I'm not going to wear this every single week, but considering that I had a total project cost of $140 Canadian, that puts our current cost per wear at $28 Canadian. So we're going to start with a whip update today, which means that I decided which way I was going to go in my spring knitting plans. I was sort of like, okay, the main thing that I want to get done next in my spring knitting plans is my Book Club Cardigan, but since kind of shelving that for a little bit to get some other smaller projects done, I last worked on that in November. I was feeling very disconnected from it and just very intimidated about picking it up again, knowing that there would be a little block of time there that would be really unpleasant, trying to reacquaint myself with the pattern and kind of understand where I had left off, and just getting back into the habit of working on something that's more complex than what I've been doing lately. It has a lot of intricate cable work going on. So I was sort of apprehensive about it, but I knew that I wanted to get back to it, and I have successfully gotten back to it. So I do have some serious progress to show you on that one, but first I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video, Craftsy. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. Craftsy has classes in knitting, crochet, sewing, quilting, cooking, baking, drawing, painting. I've taken Craftsy classes in mastering multicolor yarns, in getting gauge, which is a constant battle for me. Right now I'm taking Chris Bilsma's class, picking up stitches, necklines, hems, and more. Because I hate picking up stitches because I always feel like I'm just kind of making it up as I go, right? Patterns don't tend to give you a lot of very specific direction, and I just never feel really confident that I'm doing it right in this particular scenario. And I've done my best to try to kind of cobble together some knowledge from different YouTube tutorials when I'm in a specific situation. I will look up how to pick up edges on diagonal or for this or for that. But I love this Craftsy class for the comprehensive overview that it offers you, so that you can really understand what's going on and how best to address it in whatever particular circumstance you end up finding yourself in, because you truly get the principles and you're not just learning exactly what do I do in this one specific case and does that apply to anything else? I don't know. So with access to over 2,000 classes, videos, and bonus materials, Craftsy can help you learn new skills with detailed step-by-step instructions from industry professionals. Included are hundreds of downloadable patterns and recipes, exclusive live streaming instructor events, and the ability to share your membership with up to 3 people, making it an even better deal than it already was. So if you want to try it out, the first 1,000 people watching this video to use the link in my description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. Thanks so much to Craftsy for sponsoring this video. Okay, now I realized actually before I pull out my Book Club Cardigan, I do want to fill you in on the pole dance socks that I had made for my aunt. I showed these as a finished object in my last video. I did mean to mention last time, in referencing that project being a bit of a trial and error situation, I forgot to tell you last time that I almost rage quit that project at the very beginning, because it recommends that you start by using Tilly's very stretchy cast on, which I had never used before, but I was like, okay, sounds great, stretchy for socks makes sense. And this cast on was... There's sirens going off. That is how it felt in my head. It felt like an emergency. It felt like it was going as horribly as it possibly could. I think it took me a little bit to understand sort of just what, the maneuvering was of how exactly the yarn goes around the needles. And then I figured that out fine, but then it was okay, trying to get the next row knit into it, or I don't know, just whatever I was supposed to be doing with it. It was like I kept losing stitches and I kept having to restart. And it was sort of like, it just kept failing in various myriad ways. Like I would get a bit farther than last time, but then it would fall apart in like a new and exciting way. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, we don't need to do this project. That's fine. I've made other socks with other cast-ons. It's fine. So then I just tried to do a regular long tail cast-on, and my brain was just so fried from the many attempts at the new cast-on that I couldn't even get that to work. Like I kept messing it up, and I was like, okay, nope, this is gonna go in like a timeout for a while. So I think I had to reattempt casting it on like the next day or something because I couldn't do it. So Tilly's very stretchy cast on sounds wonderful. Doesn't seem like it should be that hard. That was not the day. Maybe on another project, but that was not the day. And I just wanted to update you because I gave them to her. I was thinking that I was going to need to send them to her, but I actually ended up being able to visit her last weekend. So I was able to give them in person. And I am never knitting any knit gifts for anyone else ever again because her reaction was, I will never get a better reaction from anyone I ever knit for in my entire life. Like you could not hope for a better reaction. Just her level of gratitude and just like effusive love for it. Like she was just so genuinely touched and just loved them so much that I'm like, this is it. It's all downhill from here. Like, why would I ever, like, just truly, it was so heartwarming. And like for all of the trial and error that went into those socks, because they were not my most straightforward project, but it felt so worth it in that moment when I gave them to her, because it just was like, I could not possibly have spent that time knitting anything else that would have made me feel any better than that did. So that was like 12 on 10. Aunt is the only one getting any gift knits forevermore. That's not true, but just, it was so nice of an experience. So very positive conclusion, little bow on that story. All right, now it's finally time to get back to the Book Club Cardigan for real. So before I get into that, let's run the project stats. So this is the Book Club Cardigan by Sari Nordland. This is a pattern designed to accommodate busts measuring from 29.5 to 61 inches, allowing for the recommended positive ease, and it is written to be a worsted weight. I'm knitting it at a DK weight. We're compensating. We'll hear more about this momentarily, but I am knitting this out of the La Bien-Aimée Wensley worsted. Now that is worsted in terms of the spin style, not in terms of weights. Like I said, it's a DK. So this is their colorway Coquelicot, and this is a beautiful fiber that is a 50% Falkland Corriedale, 25% Falkland Merino, and 25% Wensleydale. And it's this really, oh, and there's a hair in it. It's this really nice sort of rustic, but not like, I don't find wool scratchy kind of as a rule, so don't use me as a metric for this, but it doesn't feel like scratchy rustic to me. It just feels like, it's not merino, it feels sheepy, but in a very like nicely processed and into a nice vibrant color kind of way, not in like a super from the sheep kind of way. So I picked up 7 skeins of this direct from La Bien-Aimée when they were having their anniversary sale last year, but then I also had to pay duties because it was coming direct from La Bien-Aimée. So my total cost for this was $320 Canadian and 21 cents, which means that adding on the pattern cost as well as the cost of the buttons that I have for this one, this is a total project cost of $346 Canadian. And I am knitting this up on the recommended needle size of 3.5 millimeters, but remember that I'm very off gauge with this one because I'm knitting at a DK weight. Sorry, Nordland and I do not use the same needles to achieve the same gauge at all. She is a way looser knitter than I am. So because of the whole gauge thing, I am knitting a size 5 and I'm aiming for something closer to like the size 2 or 3 in the pattern. So we're very much off gauge, and I don't entirely know sort of where I am in terms of how close I am to the size this is supposed to be because I haven't done any sort of mid-project blocking on this yet. I'm thinking that's going to be my next step to kind of see, okay, are we in a good place with this? Do I need to adjust anything any further? I have sort of done some modifications along the way to compensate for the fact that, so because my gauge is smaller, I have gone up in sizes, but in a lot of cases that really kind of only accommodates your stitch gauge being different and not really your row gauge, because sometimes, like say your armhole depth is not as different from one size to the next in a pattern as the difference in your row gauge might be from what the pattern row gauge is. So I've done some adjusting, but before I get into all of that, I think I just need to show you where we're at. Okay, this is our back panel. I've picked up for each of the shoulders, as you can see, but just pay attention to this back panel. So last time I had done from this neckline cast on to this point where the stitch marker is clipped onto here. So everything from here down is new. I have done what I believe to be the entire right shoulder piece, believe being the key word. I'm gonna need to do a mid-project block to make sure that I have the right armhole depth before I solidify that by joining in the round, or joining the back and the fronts. It will not be in the round because it's cardigan. And I have picked up and started the left front shoulder, and I have a couple inches of that. So considering what I had the last time I filmed, which was 2 weeks ago, like I think that first chunk that I'd shown, I had spent 1 week knitting this in November, and then it got shelved for other priorities. So 1 week got me to there, and I was kind of apprehensive about coming back to this one, in part because I felt like I remembered it coming together quite slowly and just being like, okay, I'm gonna have to really get used to a slower pace of that. And I've been pleasantly surprised in coming back to it this time that I do feel like I got a surprise, more than I thought that I would have done in the last couple weeks, like to have gotten that much more of the body and this whole right shoulder and progress on the left. I think that while it did take me time to get reacquainted with the pattern for sure, it was sort of, I would say there were probably like 3 hours of first getting back into it that were really difficult. But past that, it got back to where it had been, and it got even easier from that, because sort of once it starts coming back, it got sort of exponentially easier as I went. So it actually hasn't felt as slow to work on as I was kind of bracing myself for it to be. But those first few hours were like, oh my God, just so many reasons to be annoyed with my past self, because I had the pattern in my app that's like my row counter app where, you know, you can highlight a line in the pattern, but also you can like scribble things on it. And it was just like, oh my God, could we not have made better notes for ourselves before we put this down? Because, so I had the little highlight on the part of the pattern I was on, but this pattern is a 2-column layout. So, and I'm sure that when I was working on it, I had it like zoomed in on the column I was looking at, right? But when I reopened it and it sort of reloads and whatever, like, which column am I even looking at? Okay, I guess it must be this one because this column is this other thing that I'm not doing yet. But okay, why is like the number 9 written on here? What does the 9 mean? It seems to kind of be over this number, which is it telling me how many stitches should be in like this section. But that's a number that's very different from what it's telling me it should be for my size. Did I decide to override this for some reason? Why? What was that about? Is it even about that? Or did it just end up on top of this and it's actually applying to something else? It was like, what does this mean? It was very cryptic, and because I couldn't come up with any reason that I would have made this modification to the number that, like, my best guess is that it was supposed to be this number instead of the number written in the pattern here. Like, because I couldn't come up with any reason for that, I was like, I'm just gonna disregard, and I'm gonna use the number in the pattern, because also the number, like, my scribble was saying to do fewer stitches and the pattern was saying to do more, and in this case where I'm having to try to make this bigger because of my gauge, it seemed like a weird choice to do fewer stitches than what the pattern. It just seemed like a weird risk, so I ignored that note from past me. Hopefully I don't live to regret that choice. Who knows what it meant? Not me. So, I mean, because I'm not in the habit of putting down projects, like I really don't shelve things like this usually and pick them back up later, I don't have a good like process for sort of documenting what I need to know and then filing it away. It was really just sort of like, I'm sure this will make sense to me when I look at it tomorrow, and then I didn't look at it tomorrow, and then I didn't look at it several other months worth of tomorrows after that. And I tried to pick it up 3 months later and was like, what is happening? So, nothing terrible has happened yet. Here's to hoping that those scribbles didn't matter. I also noticed, part of why those first few hours were very annoying, is that in doing the cable pattern, so again, looking at this back, we have these 2 big diamond cables down the sides, right? And if you look closely at them, you might be able to tell that which cable is wonky. This cable. I was like, why do I not have a purl stitch in between this diamond and the knit stitch column that is supposed to be 2 stitches over from it? Why is it touching it? And I realized that I had sort of cabled it like 1 too far or something. Like things were not where they were supposed to be. And so it was just confusing me, like trying to, when I was still really having to actively like stare at the chart to figure out what was going on. things were not adding up with the chart because this diamond was not where it's supposed to be. So that just kind of like, it just took time to understand what was going on and like catch these errors. And then once I caught them, I was like, I am not going back to fix this. I'm simply not, because it felt very challenging to get that initial sort of back trapezoid done. And I'd gotten it to a part where now it's easier because now I'm not having to build out the chart anymore. Like, I found the back difficult because you start with just the moss stitch, and then as you increase, you are growing your cable chart. So like every time you increase, you're having to sort of like learn, okay, well, so what are these stitches doing now? Because they're not just joining the moss stitch, they're forming this whole all new cable thing, like as you go. And I just super didn't want to do that again. And I was like, well, you know where's a good place for there to be a mistake? On the back. It's a good thing this is the back of the neck. The back is not my business. So I chose to leave it. And so in the next cable, the next diamond, so this is the one that's really wonky where things went askew. And then I guess on this one is where I was fixing it. So it means that things kind of shifted in like a slightly uneven way to get it back over by a stitch. But again, it's on the back. If anybody's looking that closely for a mistake, they deserve to find one. So that is completely fine. And we have proceeded. And I did make one other mistake where, on my left shoulder. So I finished the right shoulder and I did so well. I was like, look at me, just like knitting along, got it to a point where I can kind of do it while I'm doing other stuff, doesn't require that much brain power. And I think I got too comfortable, because on my left shoulder, you will see on this side, beautiful, even, perfect horseshoe cables. On this side, if we look closely, we might notice one that is very squashed, it cables too quickly, and one that's quite long to compensate, to get it back on track, because they're supposed to be lined up. And by the time I caught this, like the one that I did too close together, I was gonna have to ladder down like almost 24 rows. And the idea of having to like ladder back up an 8-stitch wide series that is cabling multiple, I was like, absolutely not. Again, good news, this will be on the back of my shoulder. None of my business. So that will be fine. And I'm just going to choose to believe that that is the mistakes out of my system, and the ones that are actually going to end up on the front those are all going to be beautiful and perfect and flawless from here, because I'm now so well practiced and I have learned from my mistakes, obviously. Now, one thing that I didn't even make a note of, but actually noticed and remembered from when I picked this up, was that when I was initially working on this, I made the decision to twist this column of knit stitches that is on either side of the horseshoe cable, because I was just finding when I started doing it the normal way with a regular knit stitch, like you can see the first few stitches here, those are just normal, and then I started twisting them and they looked so much better. So decided to do that, remembered to do that when I picked it back up, despite past me looking out for me 0%. So was pleased about that. And once I, like I said, kind of got through those first few hours of like, what's going on? What is this chart? What do I need to do? It got so much easier. So I sort of went from, as usual, I have my little chart printed out, laminated with my binder clip that I move up and down to mark my rows. And at first I was like staring at this chart, right? Like stitch by stitch, I'm like counting, trying to understand what I'm doing. Very quickly, like once I had fixed all my diamond mistake junk, I was able to shift from staring at every single square to like, okay, just on every row, I'm just gonna move it up to the next one and just glance and see, is this one where I'm cable twisting on the horseshoes? Is it one where I'm cable twisting on the diamond? Okay, I know what I need to know. I can put it down and do the row. And after that, it got to a point that I didn't even aspire to. I was so thrilled to find that I don't actually even need to look at it at all, because now when I'm looking at this, I just know what's happening, because I know what the horseshoe cable looks like when it's too soon to twist it and when it's time to twist it, because you only encounter it on the right side. All the cabling's done on the right side. So you only encounter it on the right side looking two different ways. And way A means it's not time to cable yet, and way B means it is time to cable yet. And then the diamond is also pretty self-explanatory, again, like once you're used to it, once you understand what's happening, because that one, just every single right side row, you are shaping your diamond. And so you just shape it until you have not any more stitches left. to eat into, and then you make it smaller again until it can't get any smaller, right? Like it became much easier to work on, because in this pattern, now that it's established, I can kind of just look at it and see what it's doing and understand what I need to do. And I don't know if some of that is just the particular types of cable that are in this pattern, or if this is just like my skill set in knitting cables growing, but I feel like this is the first time where I haven't really had to think about, like, again, once it was established. When I was establishing it, I had to think very hard, had to pay a lot of attention, double, triple checking, is this a cable front or back, etc. But now that it's established, like, I haven't really been having to think about, like, oh, is this one like the cable front or the cable back, which I feel like is a thing that I do a lot of usually when I'm working cables, and I just have to kind of like get it ingrained into my head in like a rote memory sort of way. But I've really been finding that in this one, like working the diamond, if you look at where it crosses over in the middle, like I've been like, okay, well, so like this part crosses over in the front, and so I'm gonna hold those stitches to the front. And I just have been like understanding the cables in a much more intuitive and logical way, just like, well, I need it to go here, and so that means that the cable needle goes here, and just like really more like understanding the mechanics of how these things actually work has made this one much easier for me than it was, again, like when I was having to first establish it. But it's just kind of fun to notice, like, hey, I think I'm like getting better at doing this thing that just like with practice, it just gets simpler. And like, I think this is just a improving of my general cabling skills that are going to continue to help me in other projects. Then though, so you do the shoulder pickup and you knit a little bit, but then you have to start doing increases for like the V-neck of the cardigans. You can see how we have like no moss stitch at the bottom here, and then we have this little moss stitch section by down there. So when I started having to do increases, because they're quite far apart in my size in the pattern, I knew it was going to be challenging to me to like remember what row to do it on. I have a really hard time using row counters where you just like increase the number at the end of every row, because I tend to either forget or more frequently just question whether I forgot, and usually don't, but once in a while do, and the once in a while means that I'm always questioning it. So I just never feel confident in the number on my row counter. So instead of trying to use a row counter to know what row I was on, instead I went back to using my chart, and since I didn't need to use it to actually know what I'm doing on the row I'm on, I started using it to mark the row where I was gonna need to do an increase. So I would just count up and see like, okay, what is the chart doing at the point in the pattern where I'm gonna need to do an increase? Like, oh, okay, that's the part where like the diamond cinches at the top, or like that's the one where like there's only 2 purl stitches beside the diamond. And so I would sort of use that as like a landmark in my head, that once I got to that row, then I knew it was time to do an increase row, rather than having to be like, okay, I'm on row 1, okay, I'm on row 2, okay, I'm on row 3, and trying to make sure I didn't mess that up before it was time to do an increase. So I just found that a little bit easier. It meant that I did have to have my chart out again, but using it very, very minimally just to look at what row it's going to be that I have to do something different. Now I did, because of my row gauge being very different and not really being compensated for in going up pattern sizes, I did end up doing a couple extra rounds of increases on the front shoulder, because like I said, the increases are quite spread out on my size. So if we're doing just 2 stitches worth of increases, it added a significant amount of extra length, which I felt like was important, because I mean, it's not gonna be very easy to like put on in any sort of accurate way, but just where the increases were ending before, because that end of the increases is supposed to be where your first button is. So imagining it buttoning like here, I was like, oh God, there's like no room for, like, this is gonna be the shortest V-neck cardigan of all time, like especially once there's like a neckband in there. So I did extra increases so that the button would sit lower, because it just felt like it needed to. And again, it added a significant amount of extra length with only adding a tiny bit of extra width. So I feel like that's going to be fine, hopefully. And I think that tonight I'm probably going to do a mid-project block, just to check how much the cables relax and how much length I do or don't get from that. Because right now I'm at the point where allegedly I should be ready to join the back to the fronts once I'm done the other shoulder, but I'm not convinced that this is enough armhole depth. It feels possibly too tight when I sort of imagine pinching it, because you don't cast on very much under the arm, but I want to block it before I do anything about that, because it's very possible that it's plenty big, and then if I knit longer before I join it, that it will end up being too big. So I think I'll do that tonight because I'm recording on a Sunday. I like to do my mid-project blocks on a school night, if you will, because it means that if I put it on the blocking mats right before I go to bed, I set it up under a ceiling fan so it has air directly blowing on it at a high speed all night. Usually by morning, it's almost dry, but I can flip it, and usually by the afternoon when I'm done work, it's totally dry. And so that's how I fit in mid-project blocks without ever feeling like it's slowing down my knitting, because if I time it right, it can all happen in the window of time where I would not have been able to do any knitting anyway. So I think I will do that tonight, and then we'll have a little bit more intel to go off of as far as whether it's time to join the back to the fronts on this one. And so far for this, I have used one entire skein, and then this is what I have left of the second skein that I'm currently working with, which looks fairly substantial to me and is confusing because so this is where the new yarn joins for the new ball. So all of this, and then what I've done so far of the other shoulder from this ball, which feels like quite a bit. So like, I guess this is going reasonably far. I have, again, 7 skeins. So I think more than halfway done my second of 7. So what percent does that make us? Does that make us like 20-something% done? All right, not bad. So all in, this has been, as anticipated, so much simpler than I had made it out to be to myself. And I knew this, right? Like in my spring knitting plans video, I was like, I know that I've just made this into a big thing and I'm avoiding it. I'm dreading going back to it because it feels like it's going to be this whole big thing and it's, I don't want to do it, but I know it will be so fine. It was so fine. This was one of those things where it's like, know thyself. Like you really just have to know how your own brain works, because you know, I was not super surprised to see many comments on that video being like, you should frog the Book Club cardigan. You need to frog this. Like, you don't want to make this. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? Don't make your life harder than it needs to be. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't make yourself feel like you need to do this. You're allowed to knit things for joy. You're allowed to knit things for fun. And I'm like, I am having fun. I just had to get past the crappy part first. And like, I think this is sometimes just a difference in like what people are looking for out of their hobbies. But like, I like doing hard stuff. Like I get a lot of like sense of reward and fulfillment from like figuring something out and doing something that I want to do, even if it's not always easy. Like it's like the concept of like the type 1 fun and the type 2 fun, if you're familiar with this. Premise being that like type 1 fun is stuff that is fun in the moment, the whole time, start to finish, it's fun. So like this will really depend on what kind of person you are. But that might be things like eating really good food, or like watching a movie that you love, or something like that. Whereas type 2 fun might be like running a marathon. Like it's not fun a lot of the time that you're doing it, but it's fun after you've done it, or maybe there are parts of it that are fun while you're doing it, but there are also parts that are hard. I feel like writing for me is very much, it sort of goes back and forth, but there's definitely a type 2 fun element to it where like some of it's really hard and some of it's a slog, and like you deal with a lot of parts of it, like the external parts, like the rejection, like when you're trying to actually get somewhere with it. That's not fun, but it's in service of the later fun, the delayed fun. So I'm not opposed to some type 2 fun in my knitting. And this was really only type 2 fun for like a few hours, like I said. And now it's just type 1 fun, and I'm happy to be working on it, and I'm gonna love this when it's done. And I'm so glad that I didn't frog it or like shelve it for years to like allegedly someday bring it back out, but absolutely never would have at that point. And I do honestly believe that like for a lot of people, maybe if they were talking about this project the way that I was talking about it, that frogging it and just doing something else would have been the right thing for them, because that's what they were looking to get out of this hobby. And like, I am here for type 1 fun. I'm here to like recharge and be relaxed, and I don't want to do that to myself, and that's so fine. That's just not me. And I knew that. So it's just funny when I see people being like, don't do this, frog it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. So here I am with my continued Book Club cardigan, and it's going great. I mean, it's not going as quickly as my kilometer scarf did when I just got to knit stockinette in the round for days. And there will be times again where I just knit stockinette in the round for days, probably when I finish this for a change of pace. But right now, I'm happy to be working on this. It's really fun to watch the cabling pattern appear. It's very satisfying, and it just comes with the feeling of accomplishment of that little bit of type 2 fun. So I am enjoying my book club cardigan that will be frogged over my dead body. Now, remember when I said that I sort of like rage quit the cast on attempt for the socks that I finished last time? I had another sort of rage quit project start in the last couple of weeks, and not because I was avoiding my book club cardigan, to be so extremely clear. I was gonna have one day last weekend where I was like, I really don't think that I could knit the book club cardigan in these circumstances, but it might be a lot of time in which I could knit stockinette. So if I could get myself set up with the fingerless gloves that I wanted to make in my spring knitting plans, maybe I could like get a whole pair of gloves done today. That would be exciting. So I was trying to get those set up. It's like the Friday night, like long car ride to go away for the weekend. I was like, I'll try to get these set up. It was such a bad idea. So it was in the dark in the car, and I had my little neck light on, but you know, things are like moving around. And in these circumstances, I kind of decided, okay, I don't think I have the brain capacity right now. Like I just went through this whole process of kind of getting through those first hard few hours with the book club cardigan. I don't think I have it in me to do the pattern Frankensteining that I was originally thinking about doing between the Last Minute Handle Stulpin by Suzanne Mueller and the double knit snowflake fingerless gloves by Tracy Lemming. So I was like, I think I'm just gonna do the Tracy Lemming gloves. We're gonna ignore the color work. And I just need to modify it a little bit because I don't have as teeny tiny of needles as she wants me to use. I'm just gonna knit these on the smallest ones I've got, which is 3.25. So I did some calculations based off of the gauge that I've gotten knitting fingering weight with those needles before on previous projects. And I tried to cast on using the Judy's Magic cast on, which I've used before. And it had been a while and I was kind of like, oh, is this gonna be hard? Like I was sort of scarred by the last sock cast on attempt. And I was like, is this gonna be terrible? I was kind of dreading it. And then I was like, oh my God, it's so much easier. I forgot how seamless this is. This is actually, dare I say, borderline fun to cast on. And then I tried to knit the first row and I failed that several times. I think just the combination of like, I think it's always a little bit tricky to get that first row, just like the sort of precarious nature of the Judy's Magic cast on stitches, just the very cast on. Precarious nature of that combined with it's dark, I've got my neck light, you know, things are moving around. I just don't feel like it was ideal circumstances because I have successfully used it before. But in this case, like multiple times, I sort of ended up accidentally dropping a stitch in trying to knit it. And maybe I just need to look up how to fix dropped stitches in a Judy's Magic cast on because it kept being like, there goes the stitch, now I have to start it again. Now I have to frog the whole thing, redo my cast on. And I think that happened 3 times. And then I said, okay, we're not doing this today. And I ended up not really needing that project anyway. I just brought my book club cardigan and I got less of it done probably than I would have of something more mindless, but it was totally fine. And I was never sitting around being like, God, I wish I had something to knit on right now. If only I had those gloves. It was fine. It just meant that I got more cardigan done. So the fingerless gloves sort of tried to happen and they were a bit of a non-starter. So I will have to circle back around to those, but I was wishing this week we had a little bit of false spring and then winter came back in full force this week. And I was like, oh, to have a nice new pair of fingerless gloves, that would have made this feel a little bit nicer. It was not meant to be. They'll probably be for next winter at this rate, but they will happen. I'd like them to happen because I already have the yarn for it left over from my All Good Tea. I have my Sandus Garn Sunday in the colorway 4018, which I love. And I think would be super cute in a pair of double knit plain stockinette gloves. Just gotta get past that cast on. This is why it truly boggles my mind, the idea of people who have a habit of like casting on a million things and like not following through, just wanting to cast on, because casting on is consistently the worst part of the project to me. Like even projects that are using a cast on that I am very familiar with, and that's not hard, just the counting your stitches, making sure you have the right number of stitches. Okay, are we joining? Make sure we don't twist it when we join. Okay, how many stitches? What are we doing? Are we increasing? Are we like that's just the worst part of the project to me every single time. And it's funny because it feels to me like it must objectively be the worst. I just can't fathom anyone enjoying that part of the project. So it very much mystifies me when people are like, oh, I just love a new cast on, trying so hard to resist. I'm like, I don't cast something on until I'm forced to, otherwise I have nothing to knit on. To each their own. I think so. The video in which I was asking about other idea, like is there a pattern that is like what I'm describing that is kind of Frankensteining these that already exists, I had asked please let me know in my spring knitting plans video. And at the time I'm recording this, that video only went up yesterday, so it's possible that I will get some more recommendations on that, but I did get a few yesterday that I need to go look at, so I will check those out before I attempt to cast this on again, in case there is something that is more along the lines of the last minute handle stitch bin, but that will work in a double knit format without the ribbing, etc. So I have a bit more research to do on those, but they will happen eventually. So that's all I've got on the whips front, but I do actually have an acquisition to share with you. It's not actually an acquisition for me, it's an acquisition for my dad's birthday, but I think we're safe to discuss. I don't think he's watching. He did watch my how much money I made on my channel, because he loves numbers and nerdy graphics as much as I do. That's where I got that from. But I think in this case we're safe. So for his birthday this year, I got him 2 extra pairs of sock blockers, because if you've been here a while, because I haven't knit my dad's socks in a while, but I have knit for my dad multiple pairs of wool socks, and like pure wool and non-superwash wool. So if you are a sock knitter, you may immediately recognize that's sort of not conventional. Like usually we'd be knitting socks with some nylon in them to prevent them from wearing out, and also we'd be using superwash that can be washed easily to prevent felting, things like that. And in making socks for my dad, I knew that he would really value the like rustic nature of like pure 100% wool. And for his purposes, which he loves handmade socks the most for when he is snowmobiling, so he is outside in very, sometimes extremely cold conditions, in this way where you're like stationary because you're on a snowmobile, but you're also moving at high speed, so there's a lot of wind which exacerbates the cold, but also like in the way you're moving, like sometimes you're working up a sweat. Like it's a very weird hot cold kind of scenario that is just so ripe for like clamminess of the feet. So the idea of the warmth and the moisture wicking properties of wool are just so ideal for this. And we both agreed that it was not worth compromising one iota of that for superwash, which would compromise I think a lot in terms of the like warmth, insulation, water wicking sort of things, or even just to add a little bit of nylon, because like that 15% of nylon is 15% less wool. And so he and I were both equally stubborn in that respect, because I did consult with him after like I made him the first ones that were all wool, and we have had some things to troubleshoot with that, which we'll get into. But in talking to him about it, like we concluded like, no, this is still the way we want to go. We just need to try to kind of mitigate these issues as much as we can. So the main issue that he has had is with felting, not because he's not washing them properly, because he is, but the problem is that just a sock in a boot that is doing a good job of keeping your foot warm is over time going to be creating friction against the bottom of your boot, which with 100% wool is still gonna felt sometimes. So he was having this issue where his sole was felting, which would mean that the leg of the sock was getting shorter and shorter as it kind of got brought into the sole, and like the heel would end up being kind of in the arch of his foot, and it would sort of just stretch to create like a makeshift heel. So all the socks were kind of getting shorter. And so we've come up with a couple of ways to mitigate this. One being I've just started knitting his socks longer, both in the leg and in the foot, to try to give a bit more leeway for like the heel to be able to stay in place, even if the sole of the foot ends up shrinking. But also last year I got him a set of these sock blockers. So I picked these up from Stash Lounge. I ordered them from their online shop because they're based in Calgary, Alberta. But I really like these ones. I'm honestly jealous of these because mine are like a laser cut wood. And I love these because they're like a clothes hanger, and because they're hollow, it means that the socks just dry faster because there's better airflow. So I got him a set of these that he could take with him when he's on a snowmobiling trip, so that when he takes the sock off his foot, he can immediately put it on a blocker, which will help prevent it from kind of shrinking down as it dries, right? If it's at all sort of like damp, clammy from a day of wear or whatever, putting them on these will mean that they are kind of back to their original shape the next time he goes to put them on his feet. And I had heard that that was going well for him, and his only problem was that he only has one set of blockers, and he now has a few pairs of these socks. So enter 2 more pairs of sock blockers. So hopefully these help him out and keep his socks in good, correctly sized shape for a little bit longer. And I'm thinking that for the next pair of socks that I knit for him, I really want to try using some BFL wool, because according to my research, it is just a breed of sheep whose wool is particularly resistant to felting. So I think that that is one that is definitely worth a shot to see if we notice any difference in his socks. But in the meantime, I think these should hopefully help with the ones he's already got. Happy birthday, Dad. All right, now that's all that I've got for today on the knitting front, which means it's time. It's finally time. We have not had time for an off the needle segment in so long. So buckle up. I have things to talk about. Okay, I have so many books to talk to you about. We're going to save that to the end. We're going to kind of rapid fire everything else. So, number one, music. This is a new category. Hilary Duff's comeback. I am living for this. I was so excited when she released her first new single, Mature. Loved it. She released the full album. I loved it. I had it on repeat for a couple of weeks. It just feels very like mature in a way where like I feel like a lot of her music when she was younger, I mean, Metamorphosis was formative to me, don't get me wrong, but I feel like everything after that just sort of felt like, I like her, I'm attached to her, but something about this music doesn't feel like it belongs to her, like someone just plunked her in there. This album feels to me like she set out to make an album, and these are the songs she wanted to make, and like she wrote a lot of them with her husband. Like it is so much more hers than I think a lot of her other music was, which is really fun to see, and I just think it's just great. I did manage to score tickets to go see her tour. I will be so excited to be there. And hearing What Dreams Are Made Of live, a moment in which I suspect I will spontaneously combust, and it'll be so worth it. So very excited about that. Also, TV. Ooh, it has been an intense TV period. There's been a lot going on that I've been invested in. I feel like there's like weird deserts and then just like complete inundations of things that I'm interested in watching. I almost didn't watch Traitors this season. This season was everything. Oh my god. So I have loved Rob Roush since Love Island. I had so much fun watching everyone assume that he had no brains and just fall in love with him, thinking that he was a dummy while he was running the whole thing. So good. I do think that there's validity to the argument saying he only won because he's so beautiful that like everyone was blinded. However, I disagree that that is what he won on alone. I do think that his looks and his charm are a big piece of the puzzle, but he had to know how to be strategic enough to use it that way, because I think there were a lot of people who were a lot less intelligent and a lot less just, and specifically like strategic, just that particular way of thinking, who are a lot less good at that, who could have looked the exact same as him, who would not have won. Because also, like, have you seen the people on that show? Like, everyone on that show is beautiful, right? So like, there's a lot more to it than that. And I just feel like he played it so well. He definitely made mistakes toward the end, but at that point he had built such a strong foundation that he was able to like slip by. Ugh, it was just a masterpiece. I was so excited to watch him win. I was like, you 100% deserve that. Do I feel bad for Maura? I did, and then she got her Birkin, and it seems like everyone's fine, so we love that for her. Have also continued to be obsessed with The Pit. That has become our like weekly, okay, when are we gonna watch our episode of The Pit? When on the weekend do we want to watch this important piece of cinema? So that continues. I do feel that season 1 was gripping me more. There was just a level of emotional investment that was so like visceral that I'm not quite feeling this season to the same degree. I don't know if some of that is just sort of like the initial like shock, like you sort of become desensitized to some of the like intense medical scenarios, but I think also just like Dr. Robbie has kind of a different vibe this season. Like he's in a different mood, he's about to go off on his sabbatical, and so I found him much more lovable in the first season. I'm having a harder time with him this season, so I think that's part of it, but I continue to be gripped. I continue to need to know exactly what's going to happen in the next hour of that shift, so very much invested in The Pit still. Also, Love is Blind. Wow, this season was probably one of the more gripping seasons, I think, of late. Bless Vic and Christine for their little iPhone videos they were able to splice in. It seems very evident to me that they were not originally supposed to be part of the season, and then they realized all the other couples were going to be a disaster, and so they needed a success story. And they were there to deliver. They are perfect angels, and I love them. Everyone else, wow, that was truly the first Love is Blind reunion, I think, where I've actually been interested the whole time and not been mostly bored once you just sort of get the initial, like, who's still together and who's not. Absolutely shocked that Brie and Connor are still together, which, can we discuss? I'm so glad that they didn't call, I don't think they called her Breezy in the reunion. I think we dropped that, because I've never seen a less breezy person in my life. And so for her to go by Breezy. Like, it genuinely, and I say this to be very clear, as one of the least breezy people alive. Like, I am a type A, capital A, triple A type A. But I'm not gonna go by the nickname Breezy. Because, like, I see that. I see me in her. And I'm like, did your friends call you that once sarcastically and you didn't realize it was a joke? And, like, you aspire to be Breezy? Because, like, the things that she would pick at Connor about, like, her level of, like, meticulousness, and again, hi, it's me. Like, I'm not saying this as, like, you suck because of that. I'm just saying this, like, know thyself. You're not Breezy. You can't go by Breezy and then be like that. And so I just, in addition to some of her behavior being very annoying to me, generally speaking, it was made extra annoying by how blatantly it went against this nickname that I'm like, who is calling you this? That was my biggest pet peeve of the season. I mean, no, my biggest pet peeve of the season is Chris being Chris, but I figured that's a given. I don't think you need that commentary from me. Girl, you're not Breezy. It's okay. Okay, that is our sort of rapid fire media segment. Now we have some books to get into. I have so many. I've been, I guess, reading a bit more than usual, but also just having a higher success rate than usual because I just don't talk about books on the channel that I'm not super into. But we've had some hits lately. Also, this has been, I have to say, facilitated by my rediscovery of the Libby app and, like, the fact that you can borrow audiobooks through your library for free. That makes it a lot easier to listen to audiobooks, which means that I, A, read some books that I just, like, they fit in, like, I just wouldn't have gotten to that many books, but B, also, I have started using audiobooks if I can find it available. If I've gotten sort of, like, halfway through a book and, like, I'm interested, like, I want to know how it ends, but I'm finding it slow because I'm not as gripped as I wanted to be, but I don't, because I will stop reading a book sometimes. But ones that sort of feel on the cusp where it's like, I feel like it might be about to pay off and it's just moving slow, I've started switching those over if I can get the audiobook to listening to them so that I can start, like, my actual physical book reading. I can move on to something else, but I can just get to the end of this one a little bit faster and still know what happened with it. So that has been helping me out, I have to say. But one that I listened to entirely in audiobook, Into the Wild by John Krakauer. So this is a nonfiction book that is written by a reporter who initially wrote, like, an article about this story and then it turned into a whole book. So this is about a young adult, I think he was, like, in his early 20s, named Christopher McCandless, who basically just decided to go live in the Alaskan wilderness, sold everything he owned, donated all the money that his parents had given him to go to law school, and lived in that wilderness for a while and died there. And his body was discovered a little while later. So this is sort of tracing his life leading up to that. He is just a very interesting guy. Like, just the way that you learn, because he kept very meticulous journals, and so you get a lot of insight into why he was doing the things that he was doing. And it's so fascinating because there are a lot of ways in which I think very differently to him. I'm not going to go into the Alaskan wilderness. There are a lot of ways in which he and I think very similarly, and I see the appeal. Like, I have no survival skills, so I'm not going to do that, but the idea of, like, renting a little cabin, and, like, I do love a glamping scenario. And that's where the wilderness meets me at my skill level. But, like, I get it. Like, I get feeling frustrated with the state of the world. I get feeling a sense of this, like, moral perfectionism of, like, anything I do in this society is participating in this thing that feels so deeply messed up to me. And, like, I can't even eat a meal without someone in some supply chain somewhere having been exploited. And, like, you know, it just, I get so much of the way that he thinks. So it's very interesting to me to see, like, if you actually follow that all the way to its logical conclusion, where does it get you? And in this case, the answer is dead in an abandoned bus in the Alaskan wilderness. So it's dark, but it's fascinating. And I cannot believe I hadn't read this sooner, because years ago I went down the Wikipedia rabbit hole on this, to a point actually where I recently had to be rereading the manuscript of the story that my agent is going to be sending out on submission soon. And it had been a long time since I had last read it, and I haven't done, like, an edit on it in a few years at this point. And reading it was so funny because I got to a part where the narrator makes some reference to Into the Wild, and I was like, I probably wrote this when I was in that Wikipedia rabbit hole, and here I am rereading it, continuing that journey. So this one I did mostly listen to as an audiobook, but I had heard that the conclusion of the book originally, because there's like speculation about how he actually died, like what exactly actually killed him isn't entirely known. And I read that there's now an updated afterword that has more information, because there have been some like scientific discoveries that have sort of like unlocked some new parts of this. And I got to the end of the audiobook and that wasn't there, and I was like, what? And I shouldn't have been surprised. This was obviously a very dated audiobook because it literally kept being like, end of disc 1, disc 2, Into the Wild. And I was like, guys, like when we converted this to a digital file, we couldn't have cut that out. But it was very old. So I ended up, I also just, this is part of my struggle in, you know, ongoing trying to figure out how I use audiobooks, because it just upsets me to not have a book physically join my library, to not be able to see it. I love being able to look at my shelves and like think about the books that I've read and like have this visual reminder. So part of what has stopped me from buying audiobooks and what has made this reminder that I can use the library so helpful is that it spares that money, so I can then still have the hard copy to be on my shelf. But so I, in this case, extra needed the hard copy because it has that afterword in it. So I finally got to read that, which was very nice. But yeah, I really, whoa, I just threw that clear across the room, and that's fine. Yeah, if you are interested in this sort of thing, and it's very much like a morbid curiosity sort of thing to me, but I would recommend it. Also on the audiobook front, one that I started reading as the book and then used an audiobook to help me finish, which is very much not the way I expected this to go, was Sunrise on the Reaping, which is the new Hunger Games prequel that centers on Haymitch's Hunger Games. I picked this up thinking, I'm going to tear through this, and this is going to really help like continue. I feel like some reading momentum, and this is really going to help me keep that up. And then it was going a lot slower than I expected it to. I think part of it is that you spend so much of this book in the build up to the games. They don't drop you into the games as early as like the original Hunger Games trilogy does. So I think I was just feeling sort of like we're not really getting anywhere. But I am glad that I used the audiobook to get to the end, because by the end, it's like it felt like so much setup, but it did pay off. It just took a lot of setup, but I'm glad that I got, like, I finished that audiobook feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach, and like I saw it coming, like what happens in the end. I mean, as to a certain degree, you just have some idea of how this is going to go from how Haymitch shows up in the actual Hunger Games series. But some of it is just sort of like context clues, you know, you're making guesses as you go along reading, and yeah, it ended basically exactly as I thought it was going to, and it still was like, so it was very like touching in the end. I feel like, as always, the Hunger Games is extremely relevant about oppression from messed up powers and the abilities and limitations of people to push back on those who are living within them and all of these things. So I do feel like Suzanne Collins continues to get it, and it was a good book. It wasn't a page turner in the way that I'm used to the Hunger Games being, but I am glad that I read it. Another audiobook hit, which I actually bought it in hard copy and then got the audiobook again from Libby, thank you to my local library. And I thought I was just going to use it to start the book because I was doing some painting inside my, like not artwork, like walls in my house. And I was like, I need something to keep me entertained while I do this. So I will just start this book. The painting turned out to be more of a project than I anticipated it being, and I finished the book. So I like to, like I said, have the books on my shelf, but it does feel weird to me to put a book on my shelf that I literally haven't like read at all, which is why I hope to like start it as audiobook, but read some of it in the physical form. That didn't go according to plan. But this is Unraveling by Peggy Orenstein. The subtitle is What I Learned About Life While Shearing Sheep, Dyeing Wool, and Making the World's Ugliest Sweater. So this is literally sort of like memoir style, but not like whole life memoir, sort of like of this particular life experience of her. She's been a knitter for a long time, but wanting to learn start to finish, like making a sweater by herself from materials to the ultimate knitted piece. And it was just great. Like, I think for any knitter who reads, I had this in my gift guide at the end of last year. I felt pretty confident it would be a good pick. Now I just feel extra confident. It was really interesting to learn more about all these different parts of the process as she was learning it. And also it's funny, it's reflective about sort of how it connects to like her life memories and people who taught her to knit and all of these things. And just, it was just good. Like, I feel like as far as reading for knitters, highly recommend. And we are not done yet. Now we're getting into ones that I read just as normal books, good old fashioned way. The independent bookstore that's closest to me, they had an author event coming up for an author who I hadn't read any of her stuff before. I hadn't heard of her. But when I read the blurb of her book, I was like, sounds like a book I would read. So I'm just gonna go to this book talk. The ticket is like $2 more than the cost of the book, and you get the book. So I was like, might as well. And I love an author talk. I always love listening to writers talk about their books. So that book is This a Cry for Help by Emily Austin. She is a Canadian writer. She's based in Ottawa. And I loved her. I loved her talk. And I loved this book. So I'm just gonna read you the blurb because I think this very much feels like something I would write in terms of it's hard to like describe in a snappy plot summary. So I'm gonna read this. Darcy's life turned out better than she could have ever imagined. She's a librarian at her local branch, while her wife, Joy, runs a bookbinding service. Between the two of them, there's no more room on their shelves with their ample book collections, various knickknacks and baubles, and dried bouquets. Rounding out their ideal life are 2 cats and a sun-soaked house by the lake. But when Darcy receives the news that her ex-boyfriend Ben has passed away, she spirals into a pit of guilt and regret, resulting in a mental breakdown and medical leave from the library. When she returns to work, Darcy is met with more unrest as protests result in a call for book bans and a second look at the branch's upcoming DEI programming. Through the support of her colleagues and by examining her past, Darcy discovers her own agency and how to rally the community that stands with her. It was so funny. Like, I would stop reading to like take a picture of a paragraph and like send it to a friend. And while being very funny, it was also like very emotionally invested in like a deep way in the story. And I really enjoyed her writing. She has a great sort of like dry sense of humor. Like, the writing style is sort of neutral and unassuming, but then like what she's saying in that tone is what's funny, and it's funnier for being said in such a flat tone. So I really enjoyed this book, and I would like to pick up more Emily Austin books in the future. And then lastly, this is a very special book that I finished, Into the Deep Blue. This is by Jennifer E. Archer, who is also a Canadian author. She is from Toronto. And this book is so special to me because I read this years ago as just a manuscript, a draft of a manuscript where Jennifer and I had swapped drafts of our stories to give each other feedback. We were both just like aspiring authors who were trying to make our manuscripts better and get them in shape to query, to hopefully get an agent, to hopefully get them published. And this is that book published. And I remember reading that manuscript and thinking, this is truly the first manuscript that I have like swapped to critique with someone where I really feel like I'm just reading a book that could be on the shelf. Like, it's already there. It's already that good. And to actually get to read it years later in an actual hardcover and in its finished form, because books do go through editing through the publication process, it just warmed my heart so much. The basic premise, this is a YA novel about 2 teenagers, Nick and Fiona, who have both lost their moms, and so they meet in like a grief support group, one of whom is, I think, there of her own volition, and the other is, I believe, court-ordered because he's been getting into some trouble and not handling his grief super constructively. So this is just sort of the story of their friendship and a sort of like, are they more than friends? Are they not? It's all very messy. Everything's intertwined with their grief, and it's just a really, really good book. Very like heartfelt but hopeful sort of YA read. And I mean, I do have to admit, I'm slightly biased because my name is in the acknowledgements for helping to read and give feedback. So I am somewhat biased, but it is such a good book. And not only this, but Jen also does screenwriting. And so she wrote her own adaptation of this into a movie, and it's actually being made. It has a fantastic cast. It has, what's her name? She's a Canadian actor. She plays Max in Ginny and Georgia, if you know. Anyway, she plays Fiona. I am so excited for this movie. Anyway, highly recommend this one for a heavy but heartwarming and also funny. Like, she does such a good job of like heavy topics but handling it in a way that still is like light and fun and hopeful. Highly recommend. All right, that is it. That is finally all that I've got for you today. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.